The Seattle Seahawks finished the 2024 season with a 10-7 record and missed the playoffs for the second straight year.
Incomplete. The Seahawks are going to win this game.
It was their first year under head coach Mike Macdonald, and there were a lot of ups and downs within his first season. Positively, they started out 3-0 and also had a second-year receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba break out as he had 100 receptions on over 1,100 yards.
Smith to the end zone. Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Unfortunately, they went from 3-0 to 4-5 and lost a couple of games they shouldn't have and cost themselves a division title in the process. But winning double-digit games in your first year under a new head coach is nothing to scoff at, and that's what I think should be remembered pertaining to their 2024 season.
We got better today, so I'm pretty stoked.
But Seattle was in a tough situation entering the 2025 offseason because they had a few big decisions in front of them. Should they run it back with a quarterback who's going to turn 35 in October, and should they pay a receiver north of $30 million per year whose name has been in trade rumors for not just one, but several years? And if they traded them away, how would they remain competitive in the process? Well, Seattle had a busy offseason to say the least, and to be completely honest, I like a lot of what they did. Now, the unfortunate part for Seattle is they play in one of the best divisions in football, and as we preview the NFC West teams over the next few weeks, you'll see that I am really high on this entire division. But pertaining to Seattle, how will they do in 2025? How far will they go? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video. If you could like the video before we start, I would really appreciate it, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing who the Seahawks brought in and who departed from their team this offseason. For most of the team previews, we start with free agency, but with Seattle specifically, we might as well address the elephant in the room and discuss the Geno Smith and DK Metcalf trades. Within a few days span in March, the Seahawks traded Geno Smith to the Raiders and DK Metcalf to the Steelers. And I know some Seahawks fans were very upset about the value they received for the Geno Smith trade, given that it was the 92nd overall pick in the 2025 draft, but I think this was a situation where Seattle recognized, hey, Geno will be 35 in October, we like what we are building, but by the time we feel we are going to legitimately compete for a Super Bowl, Geno will be 36 or 37 and have little to no trade value, so we might as well cut ties now and get what we can for him, period. And I thought this was a smart move for Seattle to do it a year early rather than a year late. And with DK Metcalf, obviously age wasn't the concern, but what was the concern was you would have had to have paid him an average of $33 million per year, because remember, DK's contract extension was 4 for $132, not 5 for $150. The last year of his current deal just usually gets lumped in with that 5 for $150 number. So in addition to paying DK Metcalf an AAV, average annual value, of $33 million per year, Jackson Smith-Njigba's contract would follow immediately, and you'd be paying those two guys roughly a combined $67 million per year. So I loved what Seattle did by moving on, again a year early rather than too late. And we will discuss the Sam Darnold signing a lot more during the offensive portion of the video, but I love this signing for Seattle because they have an out after just 2 years. And whether it's Devin Witherspoon or JSN or anyone else, they're not going to not be able to pay those guys because of Darnold's contract. And Sam is only 28 years old, so if he works out, there's a real reality he plays in Seattle for not just a year or two, but 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and is their next franchise quarterback. Cooper Kupp was also a really smart signing because they have an out in the contract after 1 year, and we know Cooper Kupp, of course, won the Triple Crown back in 2021, but he's played in just 33 of 51 possible regular season games since the 2021 season ended, and believe it or not, because I do think there is a misconception around Cooper Kupp's career, but he only has 2 1,000-yard seasons. I think there's this belief that Cooper Kupp is a 5 or 6-time Pro Bowler or a 6-time 1,000-yard receiver, and he's not. Now, his talent level is, of course, really high, but unfortunately he hasn't been able to stay healthy, which we do, of course, hope changes during his time in Seattle. I also really like the DeMarcus Lawrence signing, even though DeMarcus missed most of the 2024 season. We've talked about it before, but NFL teams are a lot smarter than they were 15 to 20 years ago, and you really don't see a lot of bad contracts being handed out. and D-Law is 33 years old coming off of a season-ending injury, and the 3-year deal they gave him is, in a lot of ways, a 1-year deal. They also brought in receiver Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who I don't expect to be much more than a deep threat, veteran offensive lineman Josh Jones, and quarterback Drew Lock. They lost, or in a few cases here, cut a few players in pass rusher Draymond Jones, longtime Seahawk Tyler Lockett, veteran defensive lineman Roy Robertson-Harris, and veteran offensive lineman Laken Tomlinson. All in all, I thought Seattle did a tremendous job navigating free agency despite having $67 million in dead cap money, which for 2025 is 4th in the entire NFL. They were in a tough position as a franchise because while DK Metcalf is a good receiver, did you want to pay him knowing JSN's contract is coming up right behind it, and knowing you're going to have to pay JSN because of the precedent that would set for the franchise and everyone grinding towards a second contract? To me, the answer was no, especially when DK had been rumored in trade for plural years. So all in all, I thought Seattle did a good job to ensure they stayed competitive while making some difficult business decisions. Now, with the Seahawks defense in 2025, this is a unit I am really looking forward to watching for a few reasons. For anyone who may be new to the channel, first, welcome, I'm glad you're here, but for anyone who may not know, I was really high on Mike Macdonald when he was the Ravens defensive coordinator back in 2023, and during the hiring process in 2024. And one thing that I love about Macdonald is his defenses know how to get after the quarterback. Seattle was the only team in the NFL last year to have 5 guys with 45 pressures or more, and Seattle also finished 11th in defensive DVOA, and why I think this is particularly impressive for Seattle in year 1 under Mike Macdonald is this was with somebody else's talent. Whenever a new coaching staff takes over, obviously they're not going to get rid of everyone, but it will take a year or two to really bring in the players they want to and construct the roster the way they want, and ultimately for Mike Macdonald and John Schneider to be on the same page. Not only that, but Seattle offensively couldn't run the ball anywhere close to as much as they wanted to last year. And why this matters for the defense is the ability for the offense to sustain drives and to, as simple as this sounds, keep the defense off the field and keep them rested over the course of the season. I do think Seattle will have an even more of an emphasis on running the football this year, and in turn, keep the defense fresh. My breakout player for Seattle is defensive lineman Byron Murphy. A huge part of Macdonald's defense is the interior defensive line, and it's not a coincidence Nnamdi Madubuike had such a great year in 2023 under Macdonald and the Ravens, and why Byron Murphy was the first draft pick with Macdonald as the Seahawks head coach. And while the Seahawks did lose Draymond Jones this offseason, one of their 5 players to generate 45 pressures last year, well, they brought in DeMarcus Lawrence and also have Byron Murphy to step up to generate pressure along the defensive line. And that's one of the biggest points of emphasis of a Mike Macdonald defense, is getting after the quarterback and making the opposing offense's life as uncomfortable as you possibly can. I also really like Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight as a linebacking duo, and I also credit John Schneider for going out and getting Ernest Jones for what was not a lot to begin with. Tariq Woolen is up and down as a player, though I think there's a lot more good than bad with him specifically. I know fans get frustrated at times with Tariq because of the tackling business decisions he can make, but you can do a lot worse than having Tariq Woolen as one of your corners. I do have some concern with the Seahawks' boundary corner depth, as Devin Witherspoon played over 500 snaps in the slot last year, though played nearly 400 at outside corner, and if there is any concern with this defense, again, it's corner depth, though I think that can be said for nearly every team as there are only so many good corners to go around. But why I am high on the Seahawks defense entering 2025 is they went from 30th in defensive EPA per play against the run in 2023 to 16th in 2024 in their first year under Mike Macdonald. And one of my biggest frustrations with the Seahawks during 2022 and 2023 was pretty much the fact that whenever they played a team that could run the football, you knew they were going to give up 150 yards on the ground and most of the time lose. And this wasn't a loss where they were generating 120 yards in the second half because they were up 21 points at halftime. No, these were games where the Seahawks couldn't stop anybody on the ground, and it was infuriating to watch. But over the past year and change, they've done a lot to rebuild the defense the right way. And with the talent they have on defense, as well as the man leading the defense in Mike Macdonald, well, they can very easily be a top 10 unit this year. And they certainly play a part as to why Seattle is such a sneaky contender entering 2025. The Seahawks 2025 draft class was without a doubt one of my favorite classes this year, and they were one of just 3 teams that I gave an A+ draft grade to. The other 2 were the Carolina Panthers and the New England Patriots. And when you look at what the Seahawks needed entering the 2025 draft versus the quality of talent they came out of the draft with, along with filling the positions of need, guys, they had without a doubt one of the best drafts of any team this year. It started with North Dakota State offensive lineman Gray Zabel, and I love the Gray Zabel pairing going to Seattle because if you know anything about the 24 Seahawks, aside from them, missing the playoffs or whatever the case may be, their interior offensive line struggled quite a bit. And obviously, given that they brought in Sam Darnold, who unfortunately folded in the final 2 games of 2024 with the Vikings in Week 18 against the Lions, and then in the wild card round against the Rams, a team he will now face twice per season, well, they needed to upgrade the interior offensive line. And my biggest thing with Gray Zabel from North Dakota State is he is a floor-raising player. And now you look at the left side of the offensive line with Charles Cross and Gray Zabel, and you have 40% of your offensive line filled, and you know you're going to be good on that side of the ball. And I personally had Gray Zabel as my 23rd best player in the class. They selected him at player 18. I'm not really worried about a -5 spot value in terms of the difference there, especially when I think Gray Zabel will be a solid starter for this team for not just a year or 2, but really the next 3, 4, or 5 years, and a guy that the Seahawks can consistently rely on. Now, I really like what the Seahawks did in the second round by bringing in South Carolina safety Nicky Manwari and Miami tight end Elijah Arroyo. With Manwari, he's a very fun safety prospect. He's 6'3", 220, ran a sub 4.4 40, had good ball production with South Carolina last year, so he had 4 interceptions, and actually had an opposing pass rating of less than 50 when targeted in 2024. And with all of these intangibles, you may be wondering, well, why did he fall to the second round if that's the case, especially given that he's a 21-year-old rookie and not going to be 24 going on 25, and that the age had to be noted. And the reason is because there's times where he can be a little linear and doesn't have the best spatial awareness, which obviously if you are a safety, you need to have complete spatial awareness with everything going on around you, and that can definitely get caught up at times. But overall, Manwari is a very fun player, and ultimately when we talk about setting guys up for success with good landing spots, I think Manwari going to Seattle is the textbook definition of that. One thing I do want to clarify with Nicky Manwari, especially because he's going to Seattle, and the fact that he is 6'3", 220 pounds, he may remind Seahawks fans of another former safety they had that was very physically imposing at the safety position, that was also 6'3", 220, and teams certainly did not want to go across the middle due to Cam Chancellor. It would not be fair to set a 21-year-old rookie in Nicky Manwari up with those types of comparisons, but Manwari is a very good safety prospect. He's a player that I think will thrive in this defense, and I absolutely love the landing spot for him, ultimately going to the Seattle Seahawks. For Elijah Arroyo specifically, I think there needs to be realistic expectations entering 2025, and obviously with Brock Bowers having the year he did last year, I think that's going to spike what people expect out of tight ends in their rookie season. But Elijah Arroyo is a solid receiving tight end prospect that will be good by the 2027 season, and honestly, I think we're going to see flashes during his rookie year. I would personally consider a successful rookie season for Elijah Arroyo a 35 to 40 reception season with anywhere from 300 to 400 receiving yards, along with 3 to 5 receiving touchdowns. He also has Noah Fant directly in front of him, and I also think there's going to be quite the emphasis on running the football in Seattle, so for 2025 specifically, I wouldn't expect all that much from Elijah Arroyo this year. One of my favorite selections the Seahawks made was quarterback Jalen Milroe from Alabama, and honestly, I think the term developmental quarterback is tossed around far too often in today's era, with any quarterback selected at any point in the NFL draft, and one that I'll reference is the 2023 Eagles selecting Tanner McKee in the 6th round, just a couple of months after they lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and after Jalen Hurts finished second in MVP voting. I really don't like how often developmental quarterback is used, because I think it's just to generate buzzwords in that, hey, maybe this 4th round quarterback that was selected this year could be a top 12 or 15 guy by midway through the next year, and far often that's not ever going to be the case. They'll be lucky if that guy starts maybe 10 or 12 games over the course of his career, and usually their spot starts not because the franchise legitimately trusts them and wants them to be their developmental quarterback. Now, obviously there are exceptions, but you get the point. Jalen Milroe specifically, to me, is the textbook definition of a developmental quarterback, because there is a real reality where Sam Darnold does not work out as the Seahawks starting quarterback. And if Sam Darnold doesn't work out in 2025, then maybe we have Jalen Milroe in 2026. Jalen Milroe also has a rushing ability that really, outside of Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels, nobody in the NFL currently has. He is a legit threat, and that's another reason why why I really love this selection is because if you are the Seahawks heading into every single week this year game planning, you have to have, or at least you should have, a Jalen Milroe specific package. He ran for 20 rushing touchdowns in the SEC last year, and anytime we're inside the 5 or 6 yard line, I want Jalen Milroe on the field, specifically so that the defense has to account for him and that they have to spend part of their week game planning against the threat of Jalen Milroe being on the field. Now, I don't expect Jalen Milroe to have a big statistical impact this year, and I do want that part to be clear, but if it's 4th and 2 on the 33-yard line, instead of attempting a 50-yard field goal, Jalen, why don't you get out there and make something happen? Whether it's a power play, whether it's a read option, or better yet, a passing play, Jalen Milroe should be effectively used in short yardage situations, and especially down inside the red zone. And the biggest thing with Jalen Milroe at this point is he can still throw the football. He's not just some decoy out there. He was an SEC quarterback. Now, I will go ahead and say that Jalen at this point is more of a runner than he is a true NFL quarterback, and that there was a reason he was selected in the late 3rd round, because if he was that good of an NFL quarterback prospect, he would have been selected much earlier than the late 3rd round, especially in what was a weaker quarterback class. The Seahawks also selected 2 players I had inside my top 95 on day 3 of the 2025 draft, as they selected Torrey Horton at pick 166, I had him at player 94, and they selected Damian Martinez at pick 223, and I had him at prospect number 82. I don't expect either player to have that much rookie impact, but I thought it was the Seahawks again raising the floor of their roster that made this draft class so good. They also signed a couple of UDFAs that I really liked, in Ole Miss pass rusher Jared Ivey, who again I had in my top 100, and LSU corner Zaya Alexander, who I had inside of my top 150 as an undrafted free agent. For Ivey and Alexander specifically, again, I don't expect much, if any, rookie impact, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are practice squad guys that don't make the final 53, as they were UDFAs for a reason. But for Seattle to come out of this class with 7 players that I had in my top 150 and really just navigate the board all throughout in a really efficient way, I thought Seattle had a tremendous draft class and that they should have pretty substantial rookie impact in 2025, and I think there's going to be a reason why they're going to be a difficult team to beat, and it's because more often than not, this team does things the right way. The 2025 Seahawks offense. Let's just go ahead and address the big elephant in the room. Sam Darnold behind the Seahawks interior offensive line, because right now, whenever you think of Sam Darnold, you probably think of the Week 18 game, 14-2 Vikings against the 14-2 Lions, number 1 seed on the line. The Vikings put up 9 points. Darnold misses several throws, doesn't see what's directly in front of him, not just one, but multiple times throughout the game, and you could replay that exact situation, and the same thing happened the following week in the wild card round against the Rams, a team that Darnold will now play twice a year, who of course have a dominant pass rush led by Jared Verse. With Sam Darnold specifically, what I think needs to be remembered is he was not that player for the first 16 games of the year. Now, the Sam Darnold haters would love to point out the Jacksonville game, in which Sam Darnold did admittedly play bad in that game. He threw 3 interceptions, including 1 really bad red zone interception. But really, aside from the Jacksonville game, and then of course the 2, biggest games of the year, Sam Darnold was a really good player for the Vikings last year. There was a reason he finished 10th in MVP voting. That does not happen by accident. You don't accidentally walk into a 35 passing touchdown season and throw for over 4,000 yards in the process. And here's a stat that not everyone knows, and certainly one that isn't discussed, but in terms of passing touchdowns under pressure last year, this is per PFF, Sam Darnold actually finished second only behind Joe Burrow. He had more passing touchdowns than Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, everybody else except Joe Burrow under pressure last year with 13. And for Seahawks fans specifically, I would point to the one play that Sam Darnold made against the Seahawks last year with 4 minutes left in the 4th quarter with the game on the line. He made a hell of a throw to Justin Jefferson, and that was who Darnold was more often than not under pressure in 2024. It's unfortunate for Sam and for anyone else who unfortunately pees their pants during the biggest moments that is what you are remembered for. I don't think it's a case of Sam Darnold all of a sudden forgetting how to play football. I think he will be fine over the course of the 25 season, and I also think that Clint Kubiak is going to do everything he can to help ease Darnold's transition into the offense. For a statistical projection with Sam this year, admittedly, I do think his numbers will decline. It's going to be hard for any quarterback to replicate 35 plus passing touchdown seasons, along with 4,000 plus passing yards, especially in an offense that has Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who I do believe are one of the more underrated running back duos in the entire NFL. Ultimately, I think the NFC West is constructed of 4 very similar teams, where their goal is going to be to run the football, play good defense, and be an incredibly difficult team to beat because they don't want to make mistakes. Now, obviously, no team wants to make mistakes, but what my point is they're going to limit as many mistakes as they possibly can, so I do think there will be a lot more of an emphasis on handing the football to Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And another rookie that may have some impact that we didn't discuss is fullback Robbie Oates, the player from Alabama, who they selected on day 3. I think there's a legit role for him in this offense, whether Seattle wants to run 12 or 13 personnel, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends, or 1 running back, 3 tight ends, and it's to really have another big body in there to help facilitate the ground game in what was a not very effective unit in 2024. Kenneth Walker was a second-round pick back in 2022, and he had over 1,000 yards during his rookie season, and ultimately the Seahawks invested another second-round pick in Zach Charbonnet the following year, a running back from UCLA. Now, with the years that Saquon and Derrick Henry and Bijan Robinson and Josh Jacobs and everybody else had last year, obviously Seattle saw the success that other teams had running the football by being the bigger, stronger team and running with the pre-snap 2 high safety structures. So I think they're going to try to replicate that of their own and have a 1,000-yard back in Kenneth Walker, and potentially have Zach Charbonnet run for 700 yards in 2025 too. This is going to be a team that's going to be a nuisance to play because they're never going to quit. They're going to want to run the football, pound the rock, get after your quarterback defensively, and basically say, hey, we're going to be gritty. We may get knocked down 6 or 7 times, but you know what? We are going to stand up every time because we want to be the tougher, stronger team, and honestly, more often than not, the tougher and stronger team is going to win more football games, and that's how I think Mike Macdonald is constructing the Seattle Seahawks for who they are going to be in 2025 and beyond. I still think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, and if Cooper Kupp can play all 17 games, then again, there is a very real scenario where the Seahawks have 2 1,000-yard receivers as well as a 1,000-yard back, especially in a 17-game season. But the biggest thing, of course, is health. And whenever you look at the 2025 Seahawks roster, and ultimately their offense, outside of the right guard and right tackle position, they don't have a lot of weaknesses. Sure, maybe Sam Darnold's not the Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson level of player, and maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba is not the Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase level of receiver, but they are overall a really, really solid unit. And ultimately with Seattle, and what I think they've done over the past couple of years is routinely hit singles and doubles and singles and doubles, and whenever you compound all of those hits, you're going to have a good football team. And what I think it's lost within the 2025 Seahawks narrative entering the year is this is a team that won 10 games last year, and to me, improved the roster this offseason. Outside of really Abraham Lucas and Anthony Bradford at the tackle and guard positions, I think this is a damn good offense, and the defense to me is really good as well, but the lone concern that I think you can argue is corner depth, which, like we mentioned during the defensive portion, is something you could argue for every team because, breaking news here, not every team is going to have 4 Pat Surtains on their roster to the point where you legitimately have to run the football because you have no better option. Seattle is going to be an absolute nuisance to play. They're going to be a pain in the rear end to play because, as simple as their philosophy is going to be, it's going to be to run the football, play good defense so we can get after your quarterback and be the tougher football team, and ultimately I think it's going to work a lot more than it's not. The floor for this team to me is going to be around 8 to 9 wins, and the ceiling is honestly not going to be that high because I think they are going to lose a couple of more games than Seahawks fans would probably like to admit, but it's because of how close the NFC West is from top to bottom. Now, in the drastic scenario, gun to your head, do you think the Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl this year? I would ultimately say no, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if this team wins a playoff game, if not 2, because of how difficult of a unit they're going to be to handle on a week-to-week basis. Seattle, to me, is doing a lot of things the right way, and I can't wait to see how this team plays in 2025. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe as it helps the channel tremendously, and we're closing into 200,000 subscribers. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.